Do you think that it's possible for an unsatisfactory conclusion to be true?
No.
No? In any case?
I think ultimately there is a satisfying reason for everything.
All right, so Christian, so how did you come to your Christian belief?
That's an interesting story. Well, I was born Catholic, never was religious, got into philosophy in college, particularly philosophy of mind, and eventually through a very serpentine route through philosophy, metaphysics, and particularly the philosophy of mind, I ended up rediscovering my Catholicity.
All right, so you were born into a Catholic family?
Mm-hmm, yeah, although we weren't hardcore practitioners, but yes, I was.
Mm-hmm. And then through study of philosophy, you came to believe in Catholicism
well, that was the end.
Fully.
That was the end game. It first came through the philosophy of mind of recognizing that materialism wasn't correct, and then after trying to really parse how the mind related to the body, or what was the metaphysics of the mental, ultimately then combined with sort of going back to Aristotelian metaphysics about causation and things, eventually coming to theology again, belief in God as a sort of concept, and then from there the implications of, well, what would that mean then if Christianity wasn't true but God was real, and this is where sort of philosophy ended and finally sort of faith took over.
So it sounds like you've considered a lot of different options, and
as many as I possibly could, yes.
So with the conclusion that you've arrived at, what's your confidence in that conclusion, like 0 to 100?
Faith is beyond those kind of parameters, I would say. Faith is, I would say the confidence that God exists is 100%. The confidence that Christianity is real and Catholicism is true is not scalable.
So not scalable, does that mean that the confidence would be... How would it compare to your confidence in the existence of God versus the confidence in the truth of Christianity?
It's almost an impossible question, and I understand why that seems like I'm dodging the question, but it doesn't. But I would say that at this point, in my personal existential experience of reality, they're inseparable. In the sense that because I know God exists, I then hold on to, as the existential core of my relation to being, the truth of Christianity.
All right, cool. So
I guess you could say 100%.
All right,
but but not in the same way.
Okay.
In the sense that 100%, in the sense that I feel like if I had enough time with somebody, if they're rationally open-minded, I hopefully could convince them that God exists and think that they should believe so. But I don't think I could do that with Christianity. I think there's something else has to happen.
Okay. So with
to rationally justify it for their own mind.
With the God question, then, what would you think is your top reason or top reasons that convince you that it's true?
Right. The top thing that probably convinced me that it's true basically has to do with the question of necessity versus contingency. So anything that's finite for certain philosophical, metaphysical reasons has to be contingent. And the question about God is, well, what is... I define God in you can define God in many ways, it's a big idea, but maybe the central way that I think about it is that thing which is not contingent. So that thing which is absolutely metaphysically necessary. Mm-hmm. And once you sort of use your mind to sort of penetrate what that thing might be, or what attributes it might have, you come to a conclusion which is, I think if you really work through the concept, something akin to what classical theology would call God. I think the word God fools a lot of people or confuses a lot of people based on how a lot of people talk about God. God's a very strange, complicated idea that is not really, obviously a white man in a man in the sky with a big white beard, except in the sense that archetypally he might understand himself to be that because that's how the archetype emerges in human consciousness. But that's obviously not what he is in and of himself in his essence.
So you're saying that through this philosophical concept of necessity and contingency, and that because the universe is finite, it must therefore be contingent on something else, which is then not
Right.
contingent.
Anything that's composed of parts has to be contingent upon something else, which they put those parts together, or. And that's a good way to think about necessity and contingency. God is, completely simple. He's not composed of parts in any way.
Do you believe in the Trinity?
I do believe in the Trinity, but I don't think I could prove it philosophically. I think that's a metaphysical an actual revelation of God. And understanding it is kind of beyond, I think, human comprehension. It's something that is supposed to be meditated upon more than sort of grasped by the mind. Mm-hmm. But yes, I do think the Trinity... The Trinity is the solution to God's problem with solipsism. I mean, God is not a solipsist. Even if he hadn't created anything, he would not be a solipsist. And the only way God could not be a solipsist is if the Trinity is true. That is, contained within the simplicity of God's existential essence is his own otherness. And he relates to himself through his own otherness and loves himself in that understanding.
Is it possible that the Trinity, like the Son, the Father, the Holy Spirit, are different parts of one thing?
Well, that's what the Trinity says. I mean, the Trinity says that you're starting to get into real linguistic games here. I mean, then people have been burned at the stake for these kind of linguistic games. Again, we're talking about a complete mystery. They are one, but one God, three persons. I mean, what that means? I mean,
if they are parts of a whole, would that then mean that
the whole is more than the sum of the parts?
Or that then because it's made of parts, wouldn't it also be contingent? If things that are
no, because it's not made of parts. This is the different thing. That's the weird thing about the Trinity. It's not made of parts. It's one thing that understands itself as being three persons. Now, we can't really understand that, but it's one thing, maybe even one existential state of being, shall we say, which within its own understanding of its own state of being comprehends itself as being three persons who are not different parts, but in fact are one. One logic gate is a single thing. To understand what a logic gate is, you have to understand, the fact that it's got a channel and it communicates information and it's got a gate, but it is one thing. Mm-hmm. For it to still be a logic gate.
Could you also make the argument that a universe is one thing?
A universe... If a universe is one thing... This is an interesting question, right? This is why am I not a pantheist, right? Why can't the universe be seen as a single thing? The universe to God might even be seen as one single thing. I think God relates to creation as a single thing. God doesn't make choices, he makes a choice to create creation. But I think that even if the universe is thought of as a single thing, within it, we do not have the access to its necessity as parts within the thing. So if the universe is a single thing, what it would require is the understanding of its own necessity on some level. And because we're in the universe and we don't have that access to that information, it cannot be a single thing. Because we're part of the universe, and yet we're these isolated modules which do not have access to the epistemological necessity of our being. And in a sense, the central aspect of what God must be is the self-understanding of his own necessity. He actually fully understands why he must exist. And the universe does not, or at least not in its form that we see. Now, maybe if the universe as a whole does, quote-unquote, understand its own necessity, well, then that's God. But the universe obviously has parts in it that don't understand that, and therefore you can really say that they're ontologically distinct things in it. And because there's ontologically distinct things in it, the universe, then I think you're just playing a word game to say it's one thing.
Why must something have an understanding of itself in order to be necessary? Right.
Well, I think that has to do with the question of what necessity means. It would be a kind of complex argument to get into, but I think it has to do with the question of if there is a complete understanding which truly explains the necessity of everything, and that this truth is out there, in a sense, in reality, that there is a complete, fully understandable reason for being for everything, that everything has a meaning and a reason. That reason, which is external to things that don't have it, must be real. It must actually be out there, and all people call this God. You could say, okay, well, why can't it be out there but not understood by a mind? I think we're reaching a point where what we're talking about with God's mind is, opaque to us. I mean, just the fact that there is a reason for everything and it really is out there, I mean, that is God. When you try to imagine, well, what does that mean for God? What does that mean in terms of how he understands it? That's forever closed off to you. The fact that it is out there just is God.
Is it possible that this fact that you're saying is out there may not actually be out there, and it could be possible that all things are contingent?
I think if you really pursue that line of thought, which I would think is the most serious way to pursue atheism, but if you really pursue it down its primrose path, you do end up with a kind of a chaos sphere, that whatever kind of illusions of order exist aren't real. And the universe is literally a kind of bubbling, gurgling chaos in which there is no meaning. Because if there's no ultimate meaning for everything, I mean, just in terms of like the principle of sufficient reason, like a true, absolute truth about why things happen, if that doesn't exist absolutely, then it really doesn't exist at all in any case. The whole thing kind of collapses epistemologically. But you could take a Schopenhauer review where, it's the idea of it is a gurgling chaos and the will kind of emerges, kind of putting things together, but it's actually a lie and it collapses back down to chaos. That, I think, is the most serious atheistic line to take if you really want to deny that God. But then you still have the problem of why anything in the first place if it is just a chaos.
If there was no reason behind why there is anything, and say the universe was just this bubbling, however you described it, is there any more? What reason is there to believe in the God hypothesis versus the bubbling hypothesis?
Yes, it's because because the intellect perceives order, and the intellect perceives non-chaos. I mean, we perceive non-chaos and we perceive meaning, and because that exists at all, and we perceive it in a very robust way in human consciousness, it points to a teleological end which would satisfy the intellect's complete desire for understanding. I mean, you can think of God as an unlimited act of infinite understanding, in which
so is it kind of like you're? I'm going to try to sum up what you just said.
Please.
Tell me if I understand it right. So we perceive that there is order and stability in the universe and within ourselves, and that is indicative of some ultimate order or stability to the universe.
I think that you'd have to, I don't know if you'd get that right away, you have to think through it, but yes, that's correct. I mean, I think even the fact that we have language and semiotic understanding, if it is a bubbling chaos, even linguistic understanding, in a sense, would be a lie. I mean, really pushed to its limits, language would actually lose meaning. You would actually never be able to convey thought, even to yourself. You would think that you would, because you have an illusion of meaning, and the illusion seems real to you, and so therefore, well, the illusion's good enough, but it's actually a gurgling chaos. But it actually, literally, in the grand, complete understanding, if you knew the truth, and the truth was a gurgling chaos, all meaning collapses.
So when it comes to in the worldview where there is ultimate meaning and there is ultimate what was the word I was using? Meaning and
order.
Order. I don't know why I couldn't think of it. Yeah, if there is ultimate meaning and there is ultimate order, it is still possible for us as humans to perceive something, but it actually not be real.
Give me an example. I don't know what you mean by that.
So can a human perceive something in the distance or perceive a meaning, but they were actually mistaken?
Sure. Yes. Absolutely. I mean, I feel like probably the journey of human consciousness from infancy to beatitude, if you will, is the correction of misperception of reality. And
so with our I guess our proneness from
Yes.
our upbringing to try to overcome our inevitable misconceptions of reality, how do we know if the perception of order isn't a misperception in and of
right.
itself?
Ultimately, I mean that because what you come to is a question that you can't. If the perception of order and meaning itself is a misperception, then again you're at the point, well, if that is the case, then I literally can't even communicate to myself ideas. I mean, you end up in a total nihilism.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if that's true, then just nihilism is true, and I can't even communicate thoughts to myself, and I'm just deluding myself into thinking I'm communicating thoughts to myself, which, by the way, is actually the belief of hardcore scientism. You read a philosopher like Alex Rosenberg, who's probably the most prominent serious philosophical materialist scientismist. He eventually says there's no such thing as meaning. Meaning is an illusion. We don't even have language. It's not even real. Now, this is crazy. I mean, you come to a point where what's crazier? What's crazy?
That was going to be my next question is, so there's a hypothesis, and there's also the God hypothesis.
Right.
But why believe one over the other?
Right. Well, I guess it comes to intuition about whether or not you think your thoughts have meaning, whether or not think language can have meaning, whether or not... and then there's also the question of objective values. I mean, the question of I perceive within my own experience certain experiences that seem to have objective good value, like love, joy, peace, beauty, and then you also perceive things that have negative value, hate, anger, misery, all these things. And the idea that these things themselves are meaningless, you come to the point where you go, no, that's just not the way it is. I mean, you just really come to the point where no, love, joy, peace, and happiness are intrinsically, objectively good. They're out there. These are good things. They are objectively true no matter what. But once you even concede that something like that can be objectively true, then you're starting to think about ultimate sort of divine meaning behind things.
It almost sounds like you're weighing the two options. You have love and hate, and the good and the bad are objective and real, and then you have it's all an illusion, and one sounds better than the other, so you're going with the one that sounds better. Are you just declaring it to be true, or why?
Well, no,
what's really distinguishing between
what's really distinguishing
the
is that my explanation at least provides a completely satisfying intellectual reason why the world exists, whereas the chaos version doesn't predict why there should be any order at all. Why should there even be anything contingent at all? Why shouldn't it just be the dark blackness of chaos?
So it's it's a more satisfactory conclusion.
Yeah, it actually explains. I mean, yeah, because I still have to explain why is me in this perception of somewhat complicated order around me and the complicated order of my thoughts. Whereas the other version, it just says, well, because that's just what happens. But that's not an explanation. That's just kind of throwing again, everything about that is kind of throwing your hands in the air and denying the possibility of any explanations for anything. So insofar as I still think that I'm trying to make a rational, quote-unquote, decision about which one to believe, do I believe the one that gives me a satisfying explanation, or do I believe the one that says there's no explanations? Well, even that is a rational test of my own mind. It's me trying to discover the truth through thinking about it, which itself implies that there's a truth out there to be discovered, that it's not just a chaos in which meaning has no place. No, my very attempt to do so implies the existence of the thing that I'm trying to discern.
Do you think that it's possible for an unsatisfactory conclusion to be true?
No.
No? In any case?
I think ultimately there is a satisfying reason for everything.
That's an interesting answer.
Yeah. No, I think but I think actually if you do end up believing in God the way I do, sort of the classical theist God, who again is it's not, it's a strange thing. It's the thing. Sometimes the way people talk about God, I don't know what they're talking about.
What if somebody thought that your conclusion wasn't satisfactory to them? Would it then be
I'd be interested
true?
to talk them through it and just see what their reasons were. And I can explain, just explain my point of view and how I got there and what it means to me and why I think the way I do. And I'd be curious to hear their reason. But no, I think if you really follow the chain of thought to the end, all decisions within the creation must be enfolded in the single decision to create from the thing which is uncreated. Therefore, everything within the creation must ultimately have meaning in some real deep way.
If you're basing your belief, your worldview and your belief off of the satisfaction of the conclusion, is 100% confidence or 100% faith, do you think that's an accurate position to hold on whether or not it's true?
Say that again?
If you're basing your conclusion on how satisfactory it is to you, and earlier you mentioned that your confidence in that conclusion is 100% or something even incomparable to that.
Yeah.
Then is 100%?
Yes, I would say that if the conception of God that I have is correct, which I think it must be this kind of thing if it's to be what it is, then yes, I would say it would have to be 100% that way.
Well, if it was correct.
If it was correct, and I would say that my belief that it's correct is, again, as a faith issue, it's 100%. But you know what I mean? But again, it's sort of beyond that kind of calculus.
Do you think it's possible for a different conclusion to be true?
Different in what way?
Many ways. You could use a different conclusion as no God, different God, maybe a different type of God, like pantheistic God.
No,
any other conclusion at all.
I would say that. No, I would say that because it's a metaphysical issue. It has to do with the cause of things, and the cause of things has to have the in order to satisfy the requirements that would be required for an initial uncreated cause would have to have these qualities, and therefore no, I don't think it could be something else. I don't think it could be a legion of Greek gods. I don't think it could be no God. I think it would have to be the kind of singular, total, unlimited act of understanding beyond comprehension that would satisfy that. I mean, again, the fact that God is the complete act of comprehension is central to is so central to what God is, because it is that understanding which then imparts meaning. When I say that God, that everything has a reason, it's because within God's own singular necessary essence is the understanding of all those things, and therefore God is the reason, because God is the understanding of everything that happened or could happen. It's God is understanding itself in its complete totality, which is actually, and this is the amazing thing, is actually very simple. And that's why God is love, I think, because love is the simplest thing. He just understands everything through the context of love and how love confers meaning to anything that happens or could happen, or anything that consciousness could or could not do.
Awesome. Well, we've gone way past 5 minutes, but yeah, that was a really engaging, interesting conversation. What did you think of it?
I loved it. I mean, I love talking about these things. It's not always I get the chance to. But,
yeah, it sounds like you definitely done a lot of thinking on it in the past.
I have.
It was very interesting.
I'm sad we didn't get to the more why I went back to Catholicism and stuff, but that's a whole other story.
I usually like to start with the foundation.
Big issues,
the
yes,
foundation
the big
is a good
issues,
place to start.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for participating.
Thank you.
So are you okay with us using this for YouTube?
Sure.